Hey folks, this is Matt out in Hillsboro, Oregon. I was just looking in the news today, and I saw on Lawrence O'Donnell's show a story about President Obama and a speech that he made, I believe, earlier today about the state of reporting and how they are partly responsible, if not mostly responsible, for the popularity and the force that is the Donald Trump. So, I'm paraphrasing here, but he was speaking of the fact that they really have sacrificed informing the American people for ratings. And this is no surprise if you've been paying attention to the media. You've heard quotes from CBS's, I believe he's his president, Les Moonves. He said that Donald Trump may not be good for America, but he sure as hell is good for CBS. So, it kind of shows you that they're willing to give Donald a pass in order to get a story. They're to get ratings, basically. They're just along for the ride. They're not there to really do their job. They're not really there to provide a public service. They're not there to inform. They're just there to see what happens next with Donald Trump and to get some ratings and to sell some advertising. So it's really a sad state that reporting's in. Anyway, Lawrence O'Donnell had a story today. He had a story yesterday, actually, where he was talking to a younger MSNBC reporter. His name is Tony. I'm just going to call him Tony D. I'm not really sure how to pronounce his last name, but anyway, he was speaking of a reporter. I believe he was a gentleman that Tony D was speaking of was a conservative talk radio host who actually went after Trump a little bit and asked some pretty serious follow-up questions, and did a good job. So but Tony D said that this conservative talk radio host had the luxury of doing a one and done interview, which basically means that this was probably the one and only time that he was going to interview Donald Trump, and therefore he could go after him and ask him tough questions because, unlike people from the corporate media or, media outlets that, they don't want to lose Trump's access. They don't want to lose access to Trump. So, they give him some softball questions so that they can just continue to go along for the ride and ride the ratings train. So, the fact that he said this, it's surprising. Hey, it's good to hear at least there's some acknowledgement of that. But I don't know if this was the reason that Lawrence did a story about this or not, but today he did a story. He had Dan Rather on and a gentleman from the Daily Beast, I believe. Anyway, he interviewed Dan Rather about the state of reporting as well, and mostly Lawrence and Dan Rather, although Dan Rather I thought he did mention all the candidates, but Lawrence I think was mostly speaking of Trump and how the Trump train is off the rails and heading for the town, and it's full of toxic waste. So it's it can't be stopped. And the state that reporting has or is in right now, and the fact that they really haven't done their job in order to stop somebody like Trump. And that's very true. I thought that Dan Rather made some pretty telling statements, and this guy knows about ethics and reporting. He questioned the Iraq War, and he lost his job. Dan Rather did, and so I think a lot of people have looked at him as maybe a throwback, at least for that instance, a throwback of Edward R. Murrow, those type of reporters. So there's some respect there with Dan Rather, and when everyone else was saying to go into Iraq, he was saying let's look at the facts. And it was an unpopular view, and unfortunately Dan lost his job, and had the rest of the media done their job, maybe we wouldn't have been in Iraq. We could have avoided a war. There would have been hundreds of thousands of Iraqis still alive if we hadn't gotten into that war. Thousands of Americans, God knows how much money spent. So the media really let us down there. They just went along with the ride, for the ride as well with Iraq. And so it really shows the sad state of affairs we're dealing with right now with our media. And the fact is that the American people and people all around the world rely on the media to inform us and to help this country stay in a healthy state so that we can know what's best policy-wise, know what the best candidates are. And unfortunately, comments like Les Moonves from CBS, it really is a telling statement, and it's really a sad statement. But anyway, Dan Rather said, and he's speaking of reporters as a whole, they've lost their guts. They're unwilling to sacrifice good reporting for access, and it's very true. And I thought that was a really good statement. He also said that journalism, at its best, counts. And both these statements are very strong statements in favor of good reporting. This is what we need, and unfortunately, we just can't rely on corporate media right now. They're just about the ratings, and unfortunately, that's the sad truth. There is some good reporters. I'm not trying to attack anybody personally, but for the most part, it's pretty ridiculous, the stories that we hear. It's a lot of Trump. It's just a lot of misinformation. And the thing that really upsets me most, I'm a Bernie Sanders person, so the fact that they've just dismissed Bernie from day one, just over and over and over again. They've downplayed his wins. They've pumped up Hillary. They've made it seem like the race is over. If Bernie wins a state, it's next to his state, so it doesn't count, or a caucus, it doesn't count, or it's a white state, it doesn't count. He can win 6 out of the last 7 primaries, and the media still dismisses him. And they say that Hillary's more electable without any information, without any facts, without any data backing that up. In fact, Bernie Sanders is actually wins with a higher percentage than Hillary Clinton against any of the Republican candidates. So, it just shows the misinformation. And it's not just Trump. Trump is a train wreck. There's no doubt about it. But the fact is that Hillary Clinton couldn't be any more pro-corporate. She's given speeches for Wall Street. And where are the transcripts? Where is the media on that? They're just not putting pressure on her. They're letting her get a free ride. And she's not the media darling that Trump is, but basically she's the corporate darling. And they have a vested interest in keeping Bernie out because they feel like it's going to cost them a lot of money. And folks, all I can say is that if you're watching corporate media, there's a few good shows out there. Rachel, I think Lawrence is a decent job. At MSNBC's really, they've really lost a lot of their liberal stances since Comcast bought them out. So, I would recommend going to an independent news source and getting your news there. Otherwise, at least if you're going to watch corporate media, at least do a little background fact checking to make sure that what they're saying is really true. And watch how they frame questions. A lot of times you'll notice that it's very slanted towards one candidate or the other, or it's just a lot of bold, just softball questions. So anyway, just be aware of that, and look in other places. Look at TYT, look at Secular Talk, Ed Schultz, Rachel Maddow is still good, and get your news from there. It's a lot more reliable. Anyway, that's all I have today. Thanks.